All right. Interesting morning. You know, microphones work best when you turn them on. Uh, hey, I'm Nathan Smith, and I am the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thank you all so much for joining me. I am happy to be here today for Basic Computing. It's one of the first times I've done a morning class in a while, so that's exciting. And I hope everybody enjoys the material today. Before we get started, there are a few things to touch on. First thing, I do, of course, want to let you know if you want to check out the example files and follow along, you're welcome to do that. The example files are located at cals.live/basic files, and I'll go ahead and throw that in the Zoom chat and in the chat for the and in the comments and live chat on YouTube or on Facebook and YouTube respectively. So just wanted to mention that so that way you are you can follow along if you want to. You don't have to use the example files in order to follow along with the class. But you might be able to use them as practice later on as well. So feel free to do that, and that'll be great. I'll go ahead and throw the little intro slide on up there so that y'all can see that as well. Okay, so we talked about example files. If you are a couple other useful things to mention. We have a ton of great stuff going on here at CALS. If you want to check out more programs, and I don't know why you wouldn't, you can head to cals.org and click on or move your mouse over events. And then once you've got that there, you can also, or once you've got events highlighted, you should see an option in the menu there that says find events online. Click on that and you should be able to check out a lot of cool stuff that we have coming up. We also have a lot of good, specifically a lot of good technology classes planned for this month. My beloved Excel class that is one of the most popular things that I do is coming up. And I believe over the coming weeks on Mondays around this time slot, we're going to be doing some other beginner type stuff. We're going to talk about Microsoft Word and some other things. So make sure you check that out. At cals.org, you can go to events and click on technology classes, and then you should see most of that stuff listed out there. Definitely encourage y'all to come on back and participate in those classes as well. Okay, let's see. So the other big thing that I always like to mention at the beginning of classes, whether they're virtual or in person, is I want to make sure everybody knows that it's not only okay, but definitely encouraged to ask questions, particularly with these types of classes that are more focused on the basics. A lot of times folks have questions that they may worry like, oh, that's too easy of a question, or that's kind of a sidetrack or whatever. Please be assured, I'm not worried about that at all. What I want to do is make sure that your questions get addressed. So if your questions are getting addressed, that's a successful class, even if I don't cover every little bit of my outline. And conversely, if you are sitting there watching this and what I'm saying is confusing you and it's going in one ear and out the other, and you want some clarification on some things, but you're afraid to ask about it, that's an unsuccessful class, because the point of a technology class is for you to learn useful stuff about technology. If you're not learning useful stuff about technology, we might as well just call it off and, you know, I'll go do some other stuff in my office and you can go about your day and, you know, we'll be good. And so it's very important to me, if you have questions, that you speak up and let me know what those are, so that that way I can make sure that anything that needs to be clarified gets clarified. Any, you know, lingering questions that you have in the back of your mind get tackled, so that way they're not distracting you from the rest of the material, and you get those questions answered, which makes the class more productive for you. So if you have questions, let me know. How do you do that? Well, if you're joining me here on Zoom, it's pretty easy. If you're on a computer, then at the bottom of your Zoom window, if you move your mouse down there, you should see a little speech bubble that pops up. Chat underneath it. Click on that speech bubble, type in your question, press enter, and you should be, I'll see your questions and I'll be able to answer them. If you are joining me on Facebook or YouTube, on Facebook, use the comments underneath on any other post. If you're on YouTube, use the live chat over to the right of my video here, and that way you can ask those questions that you have. So please ask questions. Let me know if if you run into something, if you're confused about something, so that way we can make sure that you are able to get the most out of the class. One additional thing that I definitely want you to speak up on is technical problems. If there is a technical issue with the class, that's not uncommon in Zoom. And honestly, you know, I teach technology classes. I love technology. You know, it enables us to do lots of cool things, but it also, you know, it also goes wrong sometimes, like any tool breaks or, you know, malfunctions. You know, technology is like that. So if you lose my audio, if you lose the screen sharing, if my camera goes out, any of those things happen, please make sure and let me know as soon as possible in the chat or in the comments, and that way I can make sure that gets taken care of, so we can make the most of our time. Oh, if you're here in Zoom on a mobile device, the way you get to chat is tap the middle of the screen and look at the corners for a little button that says More. Tap on that and tap Chat in the menu that pops up, and that will get you to the chat on your mobile device. All right, I think that's all the preliminary stuff. So let's go ahead and get rolling. So in this class, we're going to do a few different things, and some of those are, you know, some of those are more related than others. But the thing that connects them is there are a lot of people who use computers sometimes who aren't necessarily completely comfortable with them. They're like, you know, I use a computer at work. I know how to turn it on. I know how to check my email. I know how to open a Word document and, you know, maybe send it to my coworkers or whatever. Or they're like, well, I got this computer and it's just mostly been sitting on my desk and I'm not sure what to do with it. So the way that this class works is it's sort of to fill in common gaps that folks have in their knowledge if they've just used computers on a sort of day-to-day, you know, kind of casual or very task-focused basis, I guess. So if you think about, you know, if that's you, this class is definitely for you. We're not going to talk about the most very basics. For example, what is the keyboard and what is the mouse? Because if you're joining me for things, and so this I think is a you know, is a the kind of person that I'm talking about is kind of that's a bigger audience than the people that have absolutely no experience with computers whatsoever, and folks who have absolutely in or what they're for. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the ports and connectors on a computer, and and demystify those, because a lot of times that can be a little scary or a little overwhelming. And so having some familiarity with that will probably be helpful to you in the long run in using computers. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about where information is stored on your computer and how that works. That can be really useful to know, because it's very common for folks to do some work on their computer and then kind of lose it somewhere and not be sure where to find it or how to find it. And so I want to make sure you can find the stuff that's on your computer and that you have an understanding of how all that works. And finally, we're going to talk about common types of files and common types of programs that you might encounter in using a computer, because that's really important, useful information to have as well. And it can give you an idea of things that your computer might be able to do that you didn't know it could do, or ways that you might use your computer to make your life better. Because at the end of the day, that's what technology is really for. I know a lot of us struggle with it, or get frustrated, like, well, everything's technology and there's so much out there and stuff. And that is really true. It can be hard for anybody to keep up. But at the end of the day, the most successful technology is technology that makes your life better, and technology that makes your life worse is really working against its intended purpose. So that's what I want to do. We'll talk about some other little bits along the way that are really useful. So let's dive in. All right, whoops. There we go. Okay, so I'm here in the CALS technology classroom on the 3rd floor of the main library. And in this room, in addition to the computers that I'm working on here to run this class, there are some attendee computers that normally, when I'm doing in-person classes, folks are able to use. And I took a picture of the back of one of those a while back. And what we're going to do is just talk about the connectors that are there on the back of that computer one by one. So that should give you, ultimately, that should give you a really good idea of what these connectors are supposed to do and why they exist and things of that nature, which in turn can really help you understand your computer or any computer you encounter a little bit better, and be able to do things like, if you're reorganizing a room in your house and you have to move the computer somewhere, or if you're moving, if you're moving entirely, like to a different home or things like that. In all of those situations, you'll want to, it'll be helpful to have a little bit of knowledge about what plugs in where, so that way you can, you don't have to rely on someone, on anyone so much to kind of set that up. All right, so let's go ahead and get this get rolling here. Okay, so the first connector that I want to show you is this one right here. This is the power socket for a computer. Now the power socket, the way it works is pretty straightforward. On one end, you've got a little cable, or you've got a plug kind of like this that basically just gives you or that you plug this end of the cable into. The other end of the cable is just a standard, usually 3-prong cord that plugs in like this. Typically, if you are using what we call a desktop computer, so a computer that sits on the, the top of your desk and doesn't move so much unless you pack it up and then unpack it somewhere else. If you're using a desktop computer, you're going to have a power situation kind of like this. That's particularly true with desktop computers that have this little box like what we're looking at here, or like we're looking at here. You'll notice if I go back here for a moment, this computer has a monitor that sits on top of it and that plugs in, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then it's got this separate box called the CPU, or just the case sometimes of the computer. The case of the computer is where you is basically the brains of it. So if you have a computer like this, you need even if you didn't have the monitor, having the case means that you have a computer. You might not be able to interact with it very well, but you have a computer because this is really the computer. The rest, the monitor, the keyboard, the mouse, all those things are accessories, and technically you can have a computer without it. And in fact, many of the computers that are behind the scenes around the world don't have a monitor or a mouse or a keyboard connected to them because they usually don't need to. So a desktop computer like this with a separate CPU typically has a power socket like that. Other types of computers you might find, there are sort of what they call all-in-one computers that have where there's not a separate box. There's just a monitor, and when you plug it in, the computer works. The components of the CPU are built in behind the monitor, essentially, in those types of computers, or maybe underneath it in some cases. With those, you might have something slightly different. You might have a little power brick on the cable, like you do, and you certainly usually have that with a laptop, because instead of the brick, you have internally inside this box what's called a power supply, which converts the power that's coming out of the wall, or hopefully out of the surge protector that you plugged your computer into, turns that kind of power into power that the components of the computer can actually use, and distributes that power throughout the computer. So that's the power socket. It's pretty straightforward. Obviously, without power, hey, your computer's probably not going to work very well. Please excuse my voice, by the way. Seasonal allergies are really getting me at the moment. I was really worried I wasn't going to have my voice for this class, but thankfully it's come back somewhat this morning. But if you hear a little raspiness, that's why. All right, cool. So the next piece that I want to show you is audio jacks. The audio jacks that we have here are, there are a couple of them. And on most computers, you'll have 1 to 3 audio jacks. Here's how it works. So if you have, let's say that you had 3 audio jacks on here. Usually you'd have 3 different, jacks that do somewhat different things. One of those is the audio output, which is symbolized by this little symbol right here. I'm going to show these little symbols up at the top because sometimes computer manufacturers will helpfully label your ports with little symbols. But if you don't know what those symbols are, that can be a problem. So you want to make sure, so if you do know, so if you have a little experience with them, that helps you figure out what they are. By the way, this stuff is also in the handout. If you go again to that address, cals.live/basic-files. If you go to that address and you download the handout that's available there, then you're going to be able to see you're going to have a lot of this stuff as a reference, and that can be really helpful. So let's see. Here we go. Let me actually throw that into the Zoom chat as well, so that way it's there and handy. All right, excellent. So we have our, we have the audio output. Basically, this is a headphone, or this is a headphone jack, more or less. So you can plug in either a set of headphones or a set of external computer speakers, or even something fancier like you know, an audio receiver or something like that, depending on what you're using your computer for and where it's located. So basically, that's how your computer plays sound. Your computer might have speakers built into it, but usually those are bad. And so typically, you would want to go with either headphones if you're trying to keep things a little quieter, or speakers if you're not so concerned about the noise and you want to hear something, you know, have something a little more immersive sound-wise. So that's an audio out, and we have one of those down here. It's hard to tell with the colors the way that this photo came out, but usually the output jack for audio on a computer is green. This looks light green, but it's a pretty solid shade of green if you look at the actual computer. And you'll see there's a similar icon, not quite the same, but very similar. It's got essentially an arrow coming out of some sound waves. The other one that you'll see most frequently is the microphone jack right here. Obviously, having used Zoom for a little while, we know about these. And the microphone jack, as you might imagine, is just designed to accommodate a microphone. It could be almost any sort of microphone. Could be a microphone like this, like I'm using a lapel or lavalier mic. It could be a microphone that sits on top of the desk. It could be a microphone that actually is on a little headset that goes in front of your mouth. Could be a number of things, but regardless, you should have, or you know, you'll probably have a microphone jack somewhere on your computer, because a lot of folks use their computers for things like Zoom, or even for recording audio. So that's the microphone jack. And then the third one that you'll find usually is what's called a line-in jack. So a microphone, when you speak into it, what it's designed to do is create little electrical electrical signal that mimics the sound of your voice, basically. And then when it goes into, when a microphone plugs into some sort of audio equipment, including a computer, that audio equipment amplifies the sound that's coming, you know, the little electrical signals coming in from the mic, and turns it into sound. A line-in jack is a little bit different. It doesn't have to amplify anything, because what you do with a line-in jack is you plug in an audio, some other audio component, a CD player, sound system, you know, your phone, an MP3 player, whatever, and it takes that audio, essentially at full volume audio signal in. So that allows you to kind of like listen to another piece of audio equipment through your computer, or even record it, you know, record another piece of audio equipment directly into your computer, that sort of thing. And so that's the line-in. On this computer, the line-in jack and the microphone jack are the same port. And basically, you just, when you plug something into that port, the computer asks you, hey, what'd you plug in there? And you just tell it. And then the output jack is by itself. Okay, so that's audio jacks. The next one I want to show you is the Ethernet port. This one's very important, using it right now. The Ethernet port, you can think of as basically the internet plug for your computer. So the way an Ethernet port works is, on one side, you plug in an Ethernet cable, which looks something like this, kind of like a home phone cable, except it's a little bit wider and has a few more of those little metal pins in it. So you plug that in on one side. On the other side, you plug it into what we call a computer network. Now, that sounds like fancy terminology, but when we say a computer network, all we're really talking about is computers that are connected together so they can talk to each other. Pretty straightforward. Obviously, the biggest computer network, and again, one we're using right now, is the internet. The internet is a giant pathway to connect a bunch of computers and other devices too together. So that's the biggest example of a computer network. But computer networks can be small. We have a computer network here in the library that allows our computers to send information back and forth between each other and communicate with each other. We have a computer network at home in my house that allows me to send video to my TV, or allows me to let my phone and my computer talk to each other in different ways, things like that. So, so obviously this is super important. Now, a lot of times people connect to a computer network using Wi-Fi, and that's great too. Wi-Fi is very handy, very convenient, and I use Wi-Fi a lot, as you might imagine. But an Ethernet cable and the port here can still have some advantages over Wi-Fi in certain situations. So, for example, because Wi-Fi is basically made with radio waves. So, so just like just like any radio or a set of walkie-talkies or whatever, Wi-Fi works through radio waves. So when you have, so if you have several walls between you and wherever the Wi-Fi signal is coming from, then your signal can be, have some interference. Just like if if you're far away from the radio tower, you might not be able to hear your favorite station anymore. So you can experience some interference that way if there's something blocking the signal. You can also experience interference if there are other devices sending radio signals back and forth around you. Now, Wi-Fi is designed to minimize that as much as it can, because there are tons of devices that communicate wirelessly with each other. But at the end of the day, the more Wi-Fi there is flying around, the worse your signal is going to be, assuming that your equipment also doesn't, also isn't improving as the Wi-Fi signals, as the Wi-Fi signals multiply, basically. So, so a lot of times, if you're connected to Wi-Fi rather than a wired connection, you can get your connection will be a little bit slower to respond and things like that. And also, your connection will be a little bit slower just in terms of you can't send and receive as much information in as short a time as you might be able to with a cable. So this is really helpful sometimes, and it's certainly something you may see. If nothing else, you'll probably see it on the back of your little internet box that you got from Comcast or AT&T or Fidelity or whoever does your internet at home. All right, so that's an Ethernet cable. Next is USB ports. USB stands for Universal Serial Bus. I've said that to you, so now you can forget it. No one will ever say that phrase to you again for the rest of your life, and you can feel calm and confident in the knowledge that you will not be quizzed. The only reason that I mention that at all is the U, as in universal, is kind of an important piece of understanding USB, because you can plug darn near anything into a USB port. That's the universal part of it. So, so I'll just give you some examples. One example would be the mouse and keyboard that I'm using on the computer here. Those are plugged in via USB. The webcam, USB. The headphones and microphones, indirectly plugged into USB. This microphone's wireless, but it then runs into a USB port ultimately, and a ton of other stuff. So USB is a very useful, very helpful thing to have, and a well-designed computer nowadays is honestly probably going to have a ton of USB ports unless space prohibits it. With with some kinds of laptops, you just don't have enough room for a ton of USB ports, and that's okay. But typically speaking, you're going to have typically speaking, you're going to have a lot of room, or typically speaking, you're going to want to have a lot of those. So things that can plug into a USB port. Well, we've talked about a bunch of them already. Your phone charges via USB. If you've got, honestly, any phone at this point, any cell phone charges via USB. A lot of devices just use USB as power because it's everywhere and it's convenient now. I even have an essential oil diffuser in my office that's powered by USB. I also have a little mini Christmas tree with lights on it that's powered by USB. So there are a lot of things that are not obvious that use a USB port to power them, and so it's really useful. Two things that happen there, or a few things to mention here. So one of those is that you've got two different types of ports represented on the back here. This is a standard USB symbol, and then you also have some variants of it on the back of the computer here. So the 4 ports on the outside are kind of regular USB ports. They have a little plus next to them. The plus just means that, that this port provides a significant amount of power. So for devices that need, a decent amount of power, they can get it from that particular USB port. Great. And so these are standard, what we call USB 2 or 2.1 or things like that if they want to be more specific ports. USB 2 is kind of the standard type of port. You'll see it on a lot of different computers. I bought, I got computers as I've had computers as far back as I would say 20, 22 years, something like that ago, that had USB ports on them. So they're that were USB 2 like this. So they're definitely not new. By the mid 2000s, there were lots of them on pretty much any computer. So these USB 2 ports have been around for a while. The ones in the middle are USB 3 or super speed ports. Yes, that's what this SS stands for next to the little USB symbol here. Super speed. It's a little silly, but that's what it's called. And they do exactly what they say. They are a lot faster at transmitting information than these USB 2 ports that are on the outside. So you want to plug in things that are where it's a little more important to be able to send and receive information quickly. For example, storage devices. For example, my USB flash drive here. I take the little cap off and I plug it in. Then I can store files on this USB device. We'll talk about file storage a little bit later on. And if because this one is a USB 3, you can see the little blue in there, just like it is on the others. Because this one's a USB 3 flash drive, then it can send and receive information to and from a computer much faster than if, through one of these ports than if I plug it in over here, and certainly much faster than a USB 2 flash drive. So things like that, storage devices or video devices like your camera, will probably benefit from plugging into one of these super speed ports if you have them available. They won't always be blue on the inside, although a lot of times they are, and it's nice when they're color coded like that, but they should usually have this super speed thing next to them. One other thing that I want to mention, just because it's useful to know about, is there's another type of USB that I haven't included on in my slideshow just yet, although I want to try and do that the next time that I make one of them, and that is what's called USB-C. So it'll be spelled USB dash and then the letter C. So the way it works, or what it looks like, let me show you. switch my screen sharing setup here for a moment. All right, here we go. So you can see my web browser here now. This is what a USB-C cable looks like. It's a little bit smaller than the regular USB ports, what we call USB-A, the standard plugs that you see most everywhere. This is what a USB-C cable looks like. And the port that it plugs into is, here's a good comparison. Whoops. Oh, because that's here we go. Nope. There we go. That's a good comparison. Okay, so if you look at this device right here, you can see this is a little adapter that allows you to plug in a USB-C, plug in this USB-C cable to a port, and then plug in several different devices here. There's one of those super speed ports with the blue, like we just saw. And then here's a USB-C port. It's basically kind of pill-shaped so that it fits with this, and it's reversible. With these, you have to plug them in one particular way. So you can see if I switch back over to my the slideshow here, you can see that it's empty down here, and it's got the little plastic tab up here at the top. So you'd have to line up the empty part of the cable up here at the top with this part, and then the filled in part put on the bottom. But USB-C doesn't have that. It's reversible, so you can plug it in either way, and it can send and receive a lot more information and transmit a lot more power. So that's really handy. That's one of the more common ones that you'll see nowadays as well. So it's worth mentioning. All right, let's move on to the next thing here. Okay, so the last set of ports and connectors that I want to show you is monitor ports. There are several different types of these. There are two represented on the back of these computers, and there's one that I'm going to talk about separately. So the monitor ports that you'll most often, so monitor ports that you're seeing on the back of this computer are what we call DisplayPort and VGA. I don't remember what VGA stands for because it doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure that the G stands for graphics, but no one, again, will ever quiz you on that. And as someone who teaches technology classes, I've never found it important enough to remember. So, but what is useful to know is that these ports are found a lot of places. Particularly there, you'll find them on older computers and monitors, and you'll find them on the backs of many older TVs as well, including TVs from, including fairly new TVs, 5 or 6 years old. You could definitely find a VGA port on the back of one of those. And it's found on a lot of projectors and things like that. Again, particularly with places with older equipment. Or less expensive equipment. So a VGA port is designed to, has been around for a long time. I'd say probably at least 30 years this thing's been around. It takes a cable like this. You plug it in to line up the little pins here. Of course, you do have to plug it in one way since one side is smaller than the other. And then you actually take these little screws and screw them in here, these little posts, so that the connector stays firmly attached because it's pretty heavy. Once it's firmly attached, then to your computer and to your computer's monitor, then your computer can send visual information from the computer to the monitor so you can see what's going on. And obviously, that's the important part of these monitor ports and cables, is to see what your computer is doing visually. But this transmits a signal in this is what we call an analog port. So what it does is it transmits essentially electrical waves, kind of, again, similar to radio waves. And depending on how large or how small the waves are and how close they are together or how far they are apart, your computer assembles a picture based on that. That's fine. It's very impressive that they were able to figure that out. But at the end of the day, it's not super duper precise. And so you tend to get less, you tend to be able to get less information from the computer to your monitor using one of these ports and the cables that are attached to it. And you tend to, it tends to be a little bit fuzzier picture. The colors tend to be a little muddier and things like that. So they developed ultimately a couple of different digital picture cables. The one that's on the back of these computers is this one here, the DisplayPort connector. So you take a DisplayPort cable, which looks like this right here, kind of looks like the USB, but it's a little bit wider, and it has one corner cut out. You take it, you plug it in here, and then you plug the other end into the monitor, and it transmits a picture digitally. If you've ever watched a movie and you've seen computer code represented by like a string of ones and zeros, then that actually is kind of what it's like. Basically, that's your computer's native language, what we call binary. So your computer thinks in ones and zeros, ons and offs, trues and falses, which it considers to be all the same thing, actually. It's a little weird. It's a bit technical to get into, but it's interesting to know. So that's the way that the picture is transmitted using one of these DisplayPort connectors. When you plug it in, it sends those pictures as a digital signal, and that's a lot easier than the waves, and it's a lot easier for the monitor to tell whether something's on or off than it is like, is the wave this high or is the wave this high, and is it this far apart or is it this far apart? And so it's a lot more precise. It gives you a more detailed, crisper looking picture. It gives you higher quality colors, and there's more there are more possibilities of colors that could be represented there. And it has error checking. So if the monitor gets some information from the computer and it's like, I don't think that's right, then the computer can actually like repeat it back so that way it makes absolutely sure that it gets the picture correct. And that's really, really useful for making sure everything's accurate. And finally, a nice thing about this is it also transmits sound. So if you have a monitor with built-in speakers or a headphone jack, then you can actually get sound from the monitor or from the headphone jack from the speakers or from the headphone jack without having to run an additional audio cable over here, which is pretty cool. So there's one cable, you get picture and you get sound. Speaking of which, we have the other digital monitor port, which is a very, very important common one, and that's HDMI. HDMI, again, stands for something multimedia interface, probably, I don't know. But basically, what you're looking at, well, HD is high definition. But anyway, what you're looking at is a similar thing to DisplayPort. There are some minor differences, but at the end of the day, they're usually not all that different from each other in terms of the results that you get. But HDMI, DisplayPort is more designed for computers. HDMI is more designed for essentially home theater. So your big screen TV and your sound system and all that stuff, or even your small screen TV at this point. So the reason that it's on a lot of computers, even though it's mostly for home theater, is that HDMI ports, again, kind of like the VGA ports used to be, are everywhere. So you could, with HDMI, you can plug into almost any projector, definitely any modern TV, you know, and a whole host of other things. HDMI is really, really common. And so you'll find that on a lot of computers because it's very convenient to have, particularly on laptops where you might be taking it somewhere to present to someone, something like that. All right, so that's all of that. Now here's the key thing about this. I always want to say with these types of things, like, or particularly with this section of the class, that's a lot of information I just threw at you. The point of it is not for you to memorize all of that stuff and know it off the top of your head. I know it off the top of my head because I deal with this stuff all the time. And it's literally my job to know it. But you don't have to do that. The point of me showing you this is basically so that you have some familiarity. So that if you are, so that if you are looking at a computer, you're not going, oh man, there's a lot of plugs here. I don't really know what's going on. Instead, you're going, oh yeah, he mentioned something about that. I think that has to do with sound maybe, or, you know, I'll bet I can plug my flash drive into that thing. That's probably a USB port or whatever. The point is not for you to know everything about computer connectors or to even memorize the information that I presented to you. The point is for you to have a little bit of familiarity so that you're a little more comfortable when you sit down at a computer, or if you're plugging a computer in somewhere, or if something comes unplugged from your computer and you have to plug it back in. For all those reasons, it's good to be a little bit familiar with this stuff. And that's all. So let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit. I'm going to get rid of my slideshow here, and then we will we'll talk about some other useful things. All right. Cool. Whoops. All right. There we go. Okay, great. No, that's not quite it. Oh, I see. All right, here we are. So here I am logged into my computer. And what I want to do now is, as I said, kind of shift gears. And we're going to talk about how your computer stores stuff. So this is a pretty important, useful topic that I definitely like to show folks because it helps you find the information that you've stored on your computer. As I mentioned at the beginning of class, a lot of times folks will, they kind of have their, they kind of get their little, they have their little routines that they do with their computer. They know where to find X, Y, and Z. But beyond that, they're a little bit lost, or they feel a little bit worried about, like, how do I do this exactly? And sometimes they'll open up, they'll open up a program or, a piece of, they'll open up a program, or they'll work on some document that they need or whatever. And then later on, they won't be able to find it anymore. That's frustrating. And I mean, it happens to me too sometimes, where I'm like, I know I saved that somewhere. But there are a lot of little tricks that I can show you. And there's a lot of just general information that I can present to you to kind of, to help you avoid that scenario when it's possible to avoid. So let's talk about that a little bit and how to make that happen. So first things first, what I'm going to do, I'm going to come down here to the bottom of my screen. Oop, come on now. It's tricky. I've got this set up for Zoom, and makes it interesting to get to this. All right, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to change the setting. This is not working. Okay, cool. Here we go. All right, so I am going to go to the bottom here, and I've got this little folder. I'm going to click on that and open it up. I am using Windows 10 here on the classroom computer. Windows 10 is the most common computer operating system at this point. An operating system is basically the program that runs all your other programs on your computer. So for the vast majority of computers, you'll either have Windows, specifically Windows 10 for the most part, or you'll have what's called Mac OS, which is on Apple computers, made by the same Apple that makes iPhones and iPads. So in this case, we're using Windows 10, and but some of this is applicable to Mac computers as well. It just depends on a lot of factors. So when I click on the little folder here, it opens up the Windows 10. It's called the File Explorer. So the File Explorer is basically just a program that allows you to get around inside the storage on your computer. Your computer, kind of like a human brain, has a couple of different ways of storing things. So if you think about your memory as a person, we basically have two major settings for our memory. One is long-term memory, and one is short-term memory. So with short-term memory, if I say I'm using I'm sitting in the kitchen somewhere, and there's a phone book over here, and there's a phone across the room from me. If I go to the phone book, I flip through, and I find the number that I want. Then I look it up, and I can remember that number as I'm walking across the room to get to the phone to dial. So I'm walking across the room, I'm going 8675309, 8675309, 8675309. Then when I get to the other side of the room, I pick up the phone, I dial it in, and 2 seconds into the call, my brain deletes that phone number because I no longer need it. If somebody asked me 2 days from that, hey, what was that phone number you called the other day? I'd be like, oh, because I don't need to know. And my brain knows that, so it just gets rid of that information. That's short-term memory. Long-term memory is, happens over the course of days or weeks or months or even years. So you can remember, you can remember the day your children were born, or you can remember your first date with your now spouse, or you can remember who your favorite teacher was in school growing up, or whatever. All that stuff you'll probably be able to remember for a long time because it's long-term memory. It's something that has a lot of emotional weight. It's something that you really care about. And so it's something that your brain stores. And unfortunately, it also stores kind of painful things that way because of the amount of emotional freight that's associated with that. And so, so you can think of your computer as having long-term and short-term memory as well. It doesn't work in quite the same way, but similarly, your computer has what's called RAM, or random access memory. RAM is basically where your computer stores the things that's in the middle of working on right now. So if you open a program on your computer, then that program gets stored in your computer's RAM, so that way the computer can keep can make all the functions of that program run quickly and make the program really responsive for you. And excuse me, also when you create a file, you know, if I open up a program and I'm writing a document, then that document gets stored in RAM while I'm working on it. But if I want to save the document, that information gets stored on in the computer's long-term memory, what's usually called the hard drive of your computer. The hard drive is basically, in most computers, the hard drive is a set of very thin metal plates that spin super duper fast and store information magnetically, kind of like the magnetic stripe on the back of your credit card, but way more dense, and they can store a lot more information. And basically, your computer can read information that's stored there, and it can write information onto those little disks. And that's your computer's long-term memory. The reason that, or the difference, or one of the biggest differences besides the speed, because RAM is really, really fast, but it can't store much information. And your computer's hard drive is significantly slower, but it can store more information. The other major difference is the permanence of it. Any information that's stored in your computer's RAM, in its short-term memory, gets erased as soon as you turn your computer off. As soon as there's no power going into those little RAM chips inside of your computer, they forget everything they ever knew, and it's a blank slate. Your computer's hard drive, though, stores information permanently. And so as long as it doesn't get erased, either by you or someone else going in and erasing it, or by you destroying the hard drive in some way, either using like big old electromagnets or you know, throwing it against the wall or something, then that information will stay there on that hard drive, and it can be accessed later. So, so your computer has that short-term memory and that long-term memory. The long-term memory, the hard drive, is what we're going to look at now. So I've opened up the Windows File Explorer here. Where I start is this window that says quick, or that is this area called Quick Access. You'll notice it's highlighted over here on the left. Basically, this is going to show me folders on my computer that I use frequently. So for example, the Pictures folder, the Documents folder, the Basic Computing folder, which we'll talk about in a moment, and a bunch of other stuff there, the Downloads folder for information I've stored from online and so forth. And then if I scroll down, I'll see Recent Files. So these are files, pieces of information that I've opened up recently on my computer. And if I want to get back into one of those to, that keep working on it, then I can do that anytime I want to, just by finding it down here. And usually it'll show the last 20 files that you worked with. That's really handy. But what I actually want to do is look at the hard drive and the way things are set up in there. So over on the left-hand side here, I'm going to click where it says This PC. When I click on that, you'll see some more folders here, but you'll also see where it says Devices and Drives. And what it means by that, sometimes it'll show other devices that are plugged in, like if I plug in my phone and things like that. But it's, for the most part, it's going to show devices that I can store things on. If I were to take my flash drive here and plug that in, then it's also going to show that down here as well. There it is. Great. So these are places that you can store things, or storage that you can access on your computer. The hard drive will usually be labeled C: on here. That's for historical reasons that are not really all that interesting. But if you see C: like that, or if somebody talks about the C drive, they're talking about the main hard drive on your computer. So that's what this is. Next to that, we have this, it says DVD RW drive. This is the DVD reading and writing drive that's attached to this instructor computer here in the classroom. I could pop a CD or a DVD in there, and I can write information onto it. And of course, I can also read information from a CD or DVD. You can use CDs and DVDs to store computer files, just like you do, in addition to just listening to music or watching movies from them. And so this type of drive will allow you to do that. Those are becoming less common, but they still exist. And then finally down here is my flash drive, the little thumb drive thing that I just plugged in. For each one, there's no DVD or CD in here, so it's not showing me a little bar for this one. But for these two, it shows me the storage capacity, how much is free versus how much is used. There are 88.8 gigabytes of storage space free on this. There are 452 total. And down here, there's 27.3 free, so it's mostly free, but there's a little bit of stuff on there. So I'll double click on this one, the OSC, and that opens up this, this list of files and folders. So there are two main types of things that are stored on your computer, on your computer's hard drive, or really on any device that stores computer information. And that's called, and those are called files and folders. Files are basically just little blobs of information, and they can be a lot of different types of things. For example, one type of file that's very common these days is a digital photo. If you took one with your phone or with a digital camera, or if you have a photo that you downloaded from the internet onto your computer, any of those, any of those would be considered to be, any of those pictures would be considered to be a file. But a file could also be a document that you wrote, a spreadsheet from Microsoft Excel. They could be audio or video information, a whole number of things. So a file is basically any little blob of information that's stored on your computer. But the files, if there's no way to organize them, it'd be very difficult to wade through all the different files that are stored on your computer. So the files are organized on your computer in a series of folders, or sometimes they're called directories, depending on who you ask and how old they are and things like that. And these are hierarchy, kind of like an address is the best way to describe it. So let me show you what I mean. So here on the hard drive, we have a list of folders here. Some of these are just things that the computer uses for reference or whatever that I'm not all that interested in. There are a couple of folders called program files that are where the programs that are installed on my computer are stored. So that's pretty useful. There's a users folder. This is where Windows is stored, all of the Windows little bits and pieces. If I double click on the users folder, then I'm going to see a list of a bunch of things here. So there are a few up here that are used by our, essentially our IT administrators up here at the top. And then as you go further down, you'll see some other stuff. There's a public folder for information that's shared between multiple users on this computer, which is handy if you need, if you need a centralized storage space where everybody who uses a particular computer can access things. But other people who log on to the computer have their own folder, including me. So you'll see here, there's an NSmith folder. My name, of course, is Nathan Smith. And so when I sign into the computer, all of my information is stored inside this NSmith folder right here. So you'll probably have something similar on your computer. Now, maybe it will differ depending on what, depending on how your computer decided to do it. It may be your name or some variant of your name. It may be associated with your email address that you entered when you set up your computer in the first place, or that you created when you set up your computer. Or it may be some nickname that you have, something like that. But anyway, it's going to be some name that represents you. So in this case, the folder that I have in Smith, if I double click on it, then it opens up. and I have a list of stuff that's associated with my, what we call user account on the computer. And then inside of that is are a bunch of additional folders and some other things that have a slightly different icon, like the desktop, 3D objects, the downloads. A lot of those things don't necessarily look like folders. They don't have the little manila folder thing there, but they actually are, including the desktop. If I double click on that, you'll notice a lot of the things you're seeing here are actually represented over here on the side. Now, not all of it. Some of it's over here on the other screen that's next to this one. So not everything that you see there is necessarily something that shows up on the desktop here. But you'll see there's chill pre-show music.mp3. You heard that earlier. There's a shortcut to the old questionnaire that I used to use for post-class surveys. There are shortcuts to Excel and PowerPoint and Publisher and Word. And there are various folders that also show up here. There's some other stuff that's here that's not reflected here for whatever reason. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure why that is, but it is true. So that's something to bear in mind. But what we're looking for is here, the basic computing folder. If I double click on this, then it's going to take me in, and now I have a bunch of little icons right here. So these are the example files. If you downloaded the example files using the link that I provided at the beginning of class, these are the example files that I was talking about. So you'll see a bunch of different things here. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk through a few of these files and kind of what they do and what programs they work with. And then we're going to play around with them for a few minutes and talk about how to manage files is what we would say. So first, let's talk about the files themselves. We have 6 different types of files represented here. The first one that I want to show you is this one. It's called digitalsecrets-unicornheads.mp3. What this is you'll notice when I move my mouse over, it actually says item type MP3 file, which is not all that helpful in and of itself. MP3 could mean a lot of different things. In fact, it stands for MPEG-3, which is its own abbreviation of some sort. It has to do with some trade group, honestly, and no one will quiz you on this. No one cares whether you know what MP3 or MPEG stand for. But basically, this is a song. If you find a file where the name ends in .mp3, or if you move your mouse over it, it says MP3 file. If you find a file like that, MP3 files are files that contain audio information of some sort. So in this case, it's a song, but it could also be something like a podcast or a recording, like a voice recording. Maybe if you made a voice memo for yourself on your phone, it might be the recording of a speech or a class lecture or a sermon. Could be any number of things. It could be a whole playlist of songs, like it is for this chill pre-show music.mp3. If you don't see .mp3 at the end, there's a setting on your computer that you might want to tweak, or you might not. If you go up here to the top where it says View and click on that, you'll see there's a checkbox that says File Name Extensions. If you uncheck that, then you'll notice that .mp3 and the ends of these other file names go away. Personally, I like to leave that turned on because the file name extensions, when you are familiar with a few of them, they actually tell you something about what kind of information is in the file. And that's what they're for. They're actually designed to tell the computer what kind of information is in this file. So if the computer looks at the name of this file and says, oh, it says .mp3 at the end, that's the file name extension, or file extension is sometimes shortened to. If it says .mp3 at the end, then the computer knows there should be audio information in there. And if there's audio information in there, then it can, if it finds audio information in there, then it knows and so assuming there is audio information in there, it can open up an audio player program and it could start playing the music or the speech or whatever. So if I double click on it, it'll open up, it opens up in this case, the default music player program for Windows, which is called Groove Music. And it's a little quiet right now, but you should start to hear the music. I can kind of skip ahead to hear it. And sure enough, we can hear the music and enjoy it if it's our thing. So most devices will have some sort of, if they're capable of audio, they'll have some sort of audio player program installed on them. Windows 10 comes with Groove Music, but there are things like iTunes, and a personal favorite of mine is called the VLC Media Player. V as in Victor, L as in Larry, and C as in Cat, VLC Media Player, and a whole bunch of others. So it doesn't really matter which program you use. The music is going to sound basically the same, but it does help to have some program for that purpose, and maybe to know what program it is that you've got installed there. All right, so let's look at another type of file. So a common type of file that you'll see from time to time is a JPEG or .jpg file. JPEG or .jpg, well, sometimes you'll see JPEG, that's the same thing. JPEG files are image files. Basically, they're photos or maybe a drawing that somebody made, things like that. If I double click on this, then it opens up and I can see the picture of the dogs there. Now you'll notice instead of having a kind of a generic picture like this or this, the photo actually had it shows me a mini version of it before I even open it up. That's called a thumbnail, based on the idea of a thumbnail sketch like a lot of artists do before they start on a bigger piece. The thumbnail basically shows me what kind of image this is, and if I double click on it, then I could see the full size thing. Or actually, really, this isn't the full size thing. This is only 22%. And so I can zoom in on this quite a ways and see a lot of detail if I'm zoomed in all the way. So I can really count the whiskers and stuff if I want to. So that's, and that again opens in an image viewer program that's installed on my computer. This one is called Irfan View. That's a free one that I like. Windows comes by default with the Windows Photo Viewer, and there are lots of other types of programs that can open image files, of course. The next one that I have here is GovDocs Style Guide.docx. So GovDocs Style Guide is basically just, that's the name that I gave this document when I created it, back when I worked with the government documents down on the second floor. When I double click on this, what it's going to do is it's going to open up Microsoft Word, which was where I created the file, because this .docx file name extension tells me that, and my computer, this is a Microsoft Word file. .docx is Microsoft Word document. So if I click on over to Word, you'll see I've got, I can kind of scroll through this document and take a look at, I can read it. I've even threw an image in there. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. So Word, of course, is a very common program that, that you'll run into, particularly if you're using a computer for work or for any kind of writing. Word is the most popular, what we call word processing program that's available for computers. Word processing just means writing documents that are primarily text. And so Word gives you a whole host of tools that you can use to make your document look and read exactly the way you want it to. It's got spell check. It's got layout tools. It's got a built-in thesaurus. You can change the colors. You can change the way that the text looks, all kinds of stuff. As I said, I believe next week, I'm going to double check this, but I believe next week I'm going to be doing a Microsoft Word class at the same time. Yes, indeed. 10 to 11:30, we'll be working on Microsoft Word Part 1. If you are here for this class, then this is a good chance to, this is a class that you may get a fair bit out of, and and you don't have to have any special computer knowledge in order to undertake that class. So I definitely recommend it if that's at all interesting to you. So yeah, that's a Microsoft Word document. Anything where the name ends in .docx. Older Microsoft Word documents will just end in .doc. The X indicates like a newer version of Word. It's used for this, but I say newer within the last 10 years or so. All right, I'm gonna click the X to get out of that. And let's look at hoopla.pdf. So Hoopla is the name of a digital service that we used to offer here at the library, where you could check out various digital books and audio books and video content and stuff. We don't have that anymore, but back when we did, I or one of my colleagues, I forget to be honest with you, designed this little handout that sort of walks you through how to use it. And we packaged it up in this PDF format. PDF stands for Portable Document Format. Basically what this is it's a type of document that's designed to look exactly the same way, regardless of what kind of device you're using to look at it. So whether it's a mobile device, a computer, a tablet, an e-reader, whatever the case may be, this document, if I open it up there, it'll look exactly the same. This picture will be here, this arrow will still be here, this text will be in exactly this spot, and the font, the way that the letters and numbers and so forth look, will be exactly the same as well, because all that information is stored inside the PDF. It's also harder to make changes to this type of document, so it's useful for more secure types of documents where it matters whether the document looks exactly the same or whether it's changeable or not. For example, if you download tax forms from the IRS website, they're going to be in this PDF format. PDF, super duper common for forms and documents of various sorts, and you'll run across it a fair bit. This one opened in the Adobe Reader program, which is a free program that's kind of the standard program to open these files. But yours may open in a different program, including your web browser like Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. Okay, I'm going to exit this. This one is Requests and Discards March 2017.xlsx. So .xlsx is the file name extension that's used for Microsoft Excel workbooks, also known as also known sometimes as spreadsheets. Technically, a workbook in Microsoft Excel can contain multiple spreadsheets, and so this type of file is known as a workbook. This particular one has a number of different sheets that contain information about the government documents that I was sorting through back in that old job. I can sort and filter them. I can print them out in this nice, convenient little format. basically Excel, and spreadsheets in general just give you little boxes that you can put information in so that you can organize your information easily. That's really helpful for keeping up with financial information, keeping up with long lists of stuff, essentially, and a whole host of other things. As I mentioned at the beginning of class, I am offering my Excel course starting Wednesday at noon and going for 4 weeks. So Wednesday at noon, the following Wednesday, the Wednesday after that, and the Wednesday after that. So every Wednesday this month of May. So I definitely encourage you to check that out as well. Excel is a really useful program. It's a very helpful, it's just if you're looking for a job or things like that, it's a very helpful skill to have on your resume. And honestly, with any kind of job, almost any kind of job at least, Excel is going to make your life, if you use a computer at all for your job, Excel is going to make your life a lot easier in ways that are hard to explain until you know how it works. Excuse me. So I definitely encourage you, if you're watching this and you don't know about Excel, come join me on Wednesday, and it's going to be worth it. You'll learn a lot of really cool, useful things that'll make your life better. So that's Excel. And last but not least, we have a file whose name ends in .pptx, Staff Digital Training Digital Services. Several years ago, a colleague and I created this slideshow in PowerPoint or presentation that was designed to help train CAL's staff members to support the digital services that we offer, like Overdrive, where you can download ebooks and audiobooks and the various other services like that. So this is a really nice that's what PowerPoint is designed for. It's basically designed to give you a little visual element to something that would otherwise just be you talking, kind of like this class. At the beginning of class, when I was showing the various connectors on the back of a computer, that was a PowerPoint presentation. A lot of folks use it for, for lessons in classes. They use it for sermons at church. They use it for business presentations, certainly, things like that. So it's really useful. You can add little animations and all kinds of things. And so that's PowerPoint. Definitely also a very useful program. So those are some types of files that you might run across. We're running a little low on time, lower than I would have hoped. But I am going to show you for a few minutes the some basics about managing your files and folders that can be really helpful. So let's start with the picture of the dogs here. Let's say that I want to move the picture of the dogs from this, okay. Actually, let's talk for a moment about this folder before we, or what's here on the screen before we dig into this. So over here on the left, if I expand where it says this PC by clicking this little arrow, there's my hard drive, OSC. We talked about that. C: represents the computer's main hard drive, the main storage device for the computer. When I click the little arrow next to that and expand that out, it shows me all the folders, what we would call the top level folders that are on the hard drive. So there's the drivers folder and the program files folder and the users folder and the Windows folder. Inside the users folder, if I click this little arrow to expand it, then there's the N Smith folder. We browsed through that earlier. If I expand that one, then we've got a whole list, including the desktop. Expand that. There's basic computing, and that's where we are right now, and the test folder is inside of that. So you'll notice it's highlighted over here, and if I click somewhere else and I click back to this, I'm going to see exactly the same folders here. That's where we actually are, the basic computing folder. So again, like I mentioned before, you can think of this like an address. So for example, if I think about myself, I live in my house, in my neighborhood, or on my street, in my neighborhood, in Little Rock, Arkansas, well, in Little Rock, in Pulaski County, in Arkansas, in the United States of America, in North America, on Earth, in the Milky Way galaxy. So, and so on and so forth. I guess I skipped solar system, but whatever. But the point is, if you said Nathan Smith lives on Earth, you'd be correct about that. If you said Nathan Smith lives in, insert the name of my neighborhood here, you'd be correct about that. If you said Nathan Smith lives at, and you recited my exact address, you'd be correct about that. And computer files are organized the same way. So, so these files right here are in the basic computing folder, which is on the desktop, which is in the nsmith folder, which is in the users folder, which is on the computer's hard drive, which is in this computer. And so that's an easy way to think through like how your computer's files and folders are arranged. Basically, folders within folders within folders in a hierarchy like that. Okay, so let's talk about shifting these around a little bit and what we might want to do. Let's say I want to take the dog's picture and I'm going to put it inside this test folder right here. What I'm going to do is hold my mouse over the picture of the dogs, I'm going to put my mouse over the picture of the dogs. I'm going to hold down with my mouse button, the left mouse button, in case you have a regular mouse. I'm going to hold down with the regular left mouse button. And while I'm holding down, I'm going to move the mouse over and I'm going to let go of it above this folder labeled test. When I do, before I do, you'll notice it says move to test. Once I let go, it drops it into that test folder and it disappears from here. So that picture has been moved from the basic computing folder to the test folder that's inside of it. If I double click here, oh, there's the picture of the dogs. Great. I'll click back to the basic computing folder. And now you can actually see it redrew the icon a little bit. So I can see like, oh, the picture of the dogs is in there. That's helpful. If I double click on this folder, it'll open it up. And there's the picture of the dogs. Let's say I want to move it back out. There are a couple of different ways I can do that. One way is because I see the basic computing folder over here, I can drag it the same way that I did before. So I'll hold down with the mouse button, move it over here, and then let go, and it says move to basic computing, and it'll drop it right in there. But another option is using cut and paste. So you may have heard of these, or you may use them sometimes, cut and paste or copy and paste. Basically, the way they work is almost exactly like they sound like. So I'm going to cut this file and paste it back into the basic computing folder. To do that, I'm going to click with the right mouse button, so the mouse button I don't normally use. If you're on a laptop with a little trackpad or touchpad, you might not have a button on it, and so if you don't have a button or if you don't use the button, you can also usually tap with 2 fingers on the trackpad, and that will get you the same result. So I tapped with 2 fingers, or I clicked to the right mouse button here, and I'm going to come down and click on where it says cut. You'll notice it kind of goes a little bit translucent. So I can see like, oh, okay, that's been cut. Now I'm going to click basic computing up here to go back to that basic computing folder. Pretty easy. And then I'm going to right click in a blank area, somewhere that's empty, and I'm going to click paste right there. I do, the picture of the dogs is back in the folder where it was before. And even though this icon hasn't changed, if I double click on it, this folder is empty. Okay, let's say now, instead of moving the picture of the dogs into the test folder, I want to actually I want another copy of it in the test folder. To do that, again, there are a couple of different ways to go about it. One option is I can hold down with the mouse button, the regular mouse button, on this again, move it over here, and then while it's over this move to test, I'm going to hold down the control key, CTRL, in the bottom corner of my keyboard. And when I let go, and you'll notice before I let go, it says copy to test. When I do let go, drops it in, and now I have a picture of the dogs here, and if I double click here, I have a picture of the dogs inside that folder as well. So I've duplicated it. Another option would be to use basically the same process that I did before when I moved the picture using cut from the test folder to basic computing. What I could instead do would be to right click on it or tap with 2 fingers on a laptop, click copy, and then come in here to the test folder, right click on it, or right click in the blank area and click paste. That would allow me to drop in a copy of the picture rather than moving the original one. Finally, if I want to delete this, what I can do is I can either right click or 2-finger tap on it and press delete here in the menu, or I can press delete on my keyboard. When I do that, it disappears from the folder. But but it's not completely gone in this case. Up here at the top is what's called the recycle bin. If I double click on the recycle bin, you'll notice it says in here dogs.jpg. And in fact, if you were watching closely, you may have noticed this looked empty before, and now it has a little bit of wadded up paper in it. So that shows me there's something inside that recycle bin. When I double click on this, I've got dogs.jpg. So there's the image right there that I tried to delete. The reason that this exists is basically to keep you from accidentally, permanently deleting something that you intended to keep. You know, you all make mistakes sometimes. So this gives you a way to kind of undo deleting a file. But if you're really sure you want to delete it, you don't necessarily need it to go here. If you did it accidentally, what you want to do is right click on this or tap with 2 fingers. Oops, there we go. And click restore. And that's going to put it right back where it was. Now, though, if I want to delete it permanently and not have it go to the recycle bin, instead of pressing delete or right-clicking and clicking delete, instead, I'm going to hold shift while pressing delete on the keyboard, or I'm going to right-click and I'm going to hold shift while I click delete in the menu here. When I do that, it says, are you sure you want to permanently delete this file? And I say yes, and then it's gone. If I switch back to the recycle bin, nary a file to be seen. Finally, there's one more thing that I want to show you that's really useful for tracking down files if you're not sure where they are, and that is the search that's built into Windows. So let's say that I didn't know where this chill pre-show music was, and I wanted to find this file. To do that, what I'm going to do is come down here to the bottom, where this in this area called the taskbar, there's a little thing that says type here to search. If I click there, then it's going to give me a little blinking line here, the cursor, and it's going to allow me, to type in there. And what I want to do is just start typing the name of that file. And when I type enough, when I get the word chill in there, I've got chillpreshowmusic.mp3. I can click on that and open it up and right away. Or I can even, if I don't want to move my hand back to the mouse, I can even just, once it shows up here, I can press enter and that will open it right up for me. So super duper easy. Press that or press enter or click it in the list. And now I hear the little music. All right. So that's pretty much it. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap it up for today? All right, I don't see anything. If you think of a question later on, or if you're watching this after the class is over, then no worries. Feel free to shoot me an email. My email address is digital@cals.org, so digital@cals.org. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks so much for joining me.